None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and I think it's been really weird lately. Obviously there's a lot of change happening, evolution throughout the industry, but specifically with DC Comics, there's a lot of change happening. We're hearing about a lot of change. Well, we're not hearing any of it from DC Comics. It's like, what the hell is going on there anyway? There's indications that most of the creators that had exclusive contracts are no longer exclusive, that DC is going to be putting less emphasis on big name creators, on their titles. So, we're starting to see some indications. Jeff Johns going over to Image writing a comic. Scott Snyder's doing more independent books in publishing. We also have indications that they're shrinking down the line. Is that a good thing or bad thing? They're doing more emphasis on digital comics. Are they going woke? We've certainly seen plenty of that in their comic books lately. But it feels like DC Comics themselves are so behind the eight ball as far as getting their own narrative out that everyone else is giving it for them. So I wanted to talk to somebody who only, as far as the big two goes, he only reads the DC Comics. He gave up on Marvel a while ago. Will he end up giving up on DC Comics in the near future? Who knows? But I do want to bring him on. He's so cool. They call him the Brain. Eric, how you doing?
I'm all right. How you doing today, Wes?
I'm doing really well. I'm glad you could come on here. Love having these conversations. And I know the viewers love it. They always trash me in the comments. They ask for more Breen. Multiple people have asked you for me to give you my channel. I'm not going to. But I will bring you on at least once a week. I'll try to get you on once or twice a week. And I definitely appreciate it. And I do want to say, if you enjoy these segments, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this. Give us a thumbs down if you don't. We definitely want to hear your feedback in the comments section. Please, you don't only have to say nice things about Breen. You can say nice things about this guy too. Although I know they won't. So Eric, you are strictly an indie and DC reader now. You used to be a Marvel guy, but you kind of gave up on him. And you've been pretty happy with DC. It does appear that things are changing. Like, what is your perspective? What do you think DC Comics are doing? Because they sure as hell haven't told you.
That's a good question. A couple months ago, I thought, okay, they're doing a little streamlining. That's great. They're gonna, they have nice creative teams on Batman, Detective, Justice League for the most part, and I hear that Bendis is leaving the Superman titles. And I thought, okay, here's a chance to maybe get those going again in a direction that more fans would be happy with. And I was hearing that 5G is dead in the water, and then we hear about Future State, and then all of a sudden all the main books are going to take a 2 to 3 month pause while they introduce an entire new universe of what could be. Now,
it's interesting. If you read the DC Daily Presents Future State preview, it says specifically in here, these stories are important because they all matter, indicating that they actually all happen. Although if you read James Tynion's newsletter, he says Future State is a possible future for DC Comics. Like, even DC and their creators aren't on the same page.
Well, you can't come out and say these stories don't matter, because you might as well say, well, then don't get them. So I'm okay with them saying these stories not only could happen, probably will happen at some point, because that at some point doesn't ever have to actually get there. Because
we are getting there in Detective Comics. Mayor Nakano has been introduced. He's running. He's wanting to he's treating capes and or heroes and villains the same, just like Nakano in the next Batman and Dark Detective comic. He's the mayor. He's brought in the magistrate to police the city and weed out the heroes, specifically the Batman heroes, out of Gotham. So there's clearly moving towards that state, which is going to happen in 2025 via the Future State timeline. So that particular thread is happening. Like, we're reading it right now.
Well, okay, yes, but that doesn't mean that by the time we get to 2025 in real time, that they will still be doing those. They'll still have been moving in that direction, because 2025 in a sliding time scale, by the time the comics actually
25 years from now.
Yeah, so they can say that they can bring in characters that are being used in the main titles and put them into future state, which is actually a good idea because it does give some kind of synergy between the main titles and what they're doing in future state, because it kind of gives the people that are excited for future state something to to read and go, yeah, this is where they're going. And the people that are just looking at it as a 2-month event, never to be referenced again, or rarely to be referenced again, they can go, yeah, well, we know that it's going to be swept under the rug. So you can kind of attach what you want to it either way.
So we've talked about future state plenty on the channel. There's a lot of dissenting points of view on that, but we do know it's essentially part of a 3-month hiatus. This month here in December, you're going to get Justice League Endless War, which is Justice League Viking. Sounds like they're playing with some of the stuff that Jason Aaron was essentially doing with Avengers, where you're having a Justice League team from way back in the day. They're borrowing some villains from Thor, basically. And we're going to have that mini event that's, because Flash is already finished up. Justice League essentially is finished. I think there's another tie-in to Death Metal. But it's just, to produce some comic books, little mini event. Then we get Future State. And then in March, we're getting essentially like a relaunch, kind of DC Comics. Now, James Tynan's still going to be on Batman. Mariko Tamaki appears like she's still going to be on Wonder Woman, but we're going to get new Superman creative teams. Not sure about Detective Comics. I kind of imagine that Peter J. Tomasi will still be on there. The sales are good. People enjoy what he's doing, and it's leading to what they're doing in Future State. That's kind of tying into that. But we are going to get a new Justice League creator. Sounds like it might be or likely will be Bendis. Green Lantern is essentially wound down, so we'll probably get a new Green Lantern creative team, new Flash creative team. So it's not a complete reboot, but they're doing something. Like, what is your impression? What are they doing in March? Have they communicated anything? Whether it be through the comic books themselves or what the information that they put out to where you know what to expect in March.
No, and that's the problem. I don't know what to expect in March. I would be a lot more, it'd be a lot easier to say, okay, I'm going to take these couple months off and maybe just kind of dip my toes into future state if and where I see something I want to read. If I knew that in March that we were getting a Robert Venditti Superman or a Dan Abnett back on Aquaman, something like that, but we're not hearing anything. And it's not that far off considering we are now in December. Endless Winter is going to take us through this month, and that is in the continuity that we are reading now. But then we have a 2-month break from it, and we don't know what we're coming back to other than those couple of Batman titles, or the one Batman title, and assuming Tomasi stays on Detective. I really don't know what they're doing, and I'm not 100% sure that they do. I mean, shouldn't they have announced by now who was going to be doing Superman in action going forward?
What I've heard, people can expect this week to start getting some information, and within the next 10 days for the full creative teams to be announced. We do have a good idea that they're trimming the line. There's going to be less ongoing titles. I personally think that's a positive. Probably too many Batman titles, but there's always going to be too much Batman with DC Comics. That's their money character. So I do expect that. And we know that Scott Snyder, who's been a stalwart at DC Comics, maybe their number 1 or 2 writer for a very long time now, he has stepped back. He's not doing capes anymore. He's doing American Vampire 1976 at DC. He's doing Undiscovered Country. He's got Nocturna come out. He's got another unnamed project with Jock. I think he's got another unnamed project he's doing with Francis Manupal that are going to be independent comics. So he's not going to be like writing DC capes anymore. Jeff Johns, he is writing a sequel to 3 Jokers, but he's also got his comic over at Image Comics. We know Bendis is not on Superman anymore. I believe his Young Justice has ended. The only thing he's writing anymore, I believe, is Legion of Superheroes. I imagine he stays on that. So it is, a world of possibility. Robert Venditti is off of Hawkman. Grant Morrison's Green Lantern is essentially over. It's winding down right now. Joshua Williamson's amazing run is over on Flash. So there are great possibilities to get really awesome creative teams. What we can't expect Snyder. You can't really expect Jeff Johns on any of those projects. It sounds like, right now, Tom King, who whether I like him or not, is one of their best sellers. He's got Batman, Catwoman, he's got Rorschach, and he's got Stranger Adventures. Don't expect to see him on any of those. So like the big names are going to be like James Tynion, who's already got Batman. I don't know that they'll give him another title. It sounded like he had some type of Batman spinoff that he's working on that hasn't been announced yet. But like Joshua Williamson, who I'm hoping does Green Lantern. Like who would be some of the other big names? It sounds like there's going to be kind of a void as far as that top level, like a name talent.
Well, we mentioned a couple of them already. Venditti, we don't know what he's going to do, and I would like to think
Nightwing. Come on.
I'd like to think that he could do a couple of books a month, because remember, just by being on Batman and Detective, you're already writing 2 full comics a month. So really, if you stretch yourself past 3, it starts getting a little dicey, and maybe that's why Tynan and Tomasi aren't really fully involved in Future State, because they are working on the books.
Well, I don't think anybody that's going to be involved with the new launch is really very involved with Future State, other than like Bendis and Tamaki. Otherwise, they brought in a bunch of like screenwriters and stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of a good sign, because hopefully there's something for Dan Abnett on the other side of this. I said, hopefully we get a couple of books from Venditti. Joshua Williamson, the guy that's writing Flash, Kevin Shinnick.
I believe he will still be on Flash.
I'm really impressed with his run so far. I don't think it's really missed a beat. Not being. I mean, I read about 10 DC books a month, so there's probably some really good creators out there they're just under my radar. And hopefully,
my favorite right now is The Last God, Philip Kennedy Johnson. I hope he's on Superman or something.
Yeah, there you go. I can see, streamline the line does kind of make sense, but I'd also like to see a little less emphasis on Batman. Instead of, like I said, instead of a 6th Batman book, how about 1 JSA?
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be more options for comic book fans, or eventually they're gonna dip out. There's always been more Batman Superman books, maybe necessarily than we needed, but there was also plenty of other choices. If they go in the direction where it's all Batman, Superman, Justice League, and you eliminate all the lesser known characters entirely, as far as like being featured in their own books, I don't see that being a good strategy going forward. And
one of the bad things, I don't think we're going to get an opportunity for Venditti's Hawkman or even Venditti's Freedom Fighters, which I thought were 2 really good stories. They weren't really attached to anything, although unfortunately Venditti's Hawkman did get run into Year the Villain. But those were like really cool stories where you could go visit that, and you knew you were going to get a quality story, and you didn't have to keep up with everything else because it wasn't going to be so involved in that. But I don't think we're going to get those lesser known heroes or lesser known teams as much, unless there's a movie or a TV show. I think that's sad.
That is an unfortunate, byproduct of modern comics. But honestly, that's been going on for decades. There's been so many great titles that have just never caught on with the masses. So I understand the idea of giving the masses what they want, but sometimes I said there's a reason why when you go to Golden Corral, you eventually stop eating because eventually you get full. And I think that's the risk run by DC in just overloading the bat.
Mm-hmm. So one of the, I don't know, it's kind of one of the weird things that we've been seeing is, there's been a big emphasis on DC Black Label. It feels like it. I honestly believe continuity is not so much going to be a thing anymore. I can see the positives. I can see the negatives. I can see people saying, listen, I've been reading DC since 1980. Why would you give up continuity now? I'm fully invested in it. And I can also see, well, why trap ourselves down with only maintaining within this continuity when there's other stories to tell that maybe don't exactly gel in with what we're doing right now? And Batman can be doing this or that, or maybe go revisiting a version of Green Lantern that we haven't seen for 20 years. Like, I think there's pros and cons to it.
I would agree. I think the best solution is to keep the main line that you have going, keep that in continuity, and maybe a larger emphasis on the Elseworlds style. And I guess maybe that's what the Omniverse, will enable creators to do, where you can pluck events from certain points in time or that have never happened and either expand on them or create new storylines. I've never been a big fan of shoehorning continuity into, or like, okay, this is what happened between issues 23 and 24, because if it happens 20, 30 years later, perspectives change, styles change, what's acceptable changes, and it just kind of always seems out of place. But if you do them as Elseworld stories, or as the Omniverse, which allows you infinite universes to tell your stories, that could work. But I think you do have to have something tethered into continuity to keep
character continuity. You need character continuity.
And I think what happens in Nightwing issue 78 should also reflect what happened in Nightwing 68. I don't want to see a total abandonment of that, because it does give comic book fans that get in, that are really invested in it, something to hold on to. And if you have both possibilities, then maybe you do find a way to increase your readership and not lose what you already have.
So I have a couple other things I want to talk about. First up, you just mentioned Nightwing. It feels like DC Comics, when Tom King left the Batman series at issue 85, they kind of recognized that they maybe had broken a lot of the Bat family itself. Obviously, Batman hadn't really been doing Batman things for very long. He'd been completely depressed. It didn't really make sense as far as the continuity of the character. Now, James Tynion, while I don't love the run, Batman is doing Batman stuff. He's acting like Batman. We also had, I believe it was Batman 55. Rick Grayson got shot in the head by KG Beast. Dick Grayson got shot in the head by KG Beast. Forgot who he was, became Rick Grayson. Denied all his friends, and had been this weird. I don't even want to talk about Nightwing. It was so bad, but that has been undone. Now he is back to being Dick Grayson. We had Damian Wayne in Teen Titans, Adam Glass's Teen Titans, which I enjoyed, but I did not like the part where he had the secret prison and he was essentially kind of a villain. He is no longer Robin. He's thrown down the sigil and he's gone off to go rehabilitate himself. It was Tim Drake, dropped the Red Robin moniker and became Drake in Young Justice. He's back to being Red Robin, and obviously it sounds like Barbara Gordon is Oracle again. So it feels like they started reconstructing the Bat family. So that at least gives me hope that DC has identified some of the issues that they've done to their characters, deconstructing them so much, and they're trying to reconstruct them and put them back together again.
Yeah, the funny thing about comics too is that characters go through these things all the time, and 5 years from now, you don't really remember how crazy it was while the characters were being deconstructed, and it always seems like it's a lot more of a pain in the ass while it's happening. And then once they reassemble, you realize, okay, eventually it gets back to the status quo. Now that's either, depending on your perspective, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. If something's done to your favorite character that you hate, obviously you're just happy to get back to that status quo. But when something happens, that really does change the character seemingly for the better. Like, for example, I'd have been okay if James Rhodes had stayed Iron Man permanently, because that was such a neat change. But eventually things always come back to why.
Yeah, Kyle Rayner probably should have stayed Green Lantern. Wally West should have stayed Flash.
But eventually, I said, it had to go back to being Hal and Barry. It's like, eventually, that's why Peter Parker isn't married anymore. But getting back to the Bat family, it's Nightwing works better, obviously, when he is Dick Grayson. And I don't know why so many people in positions of power have picked on him through the years. Hopefully that's over, because I want to read Dick Grayson. I don't want to read Rick Grayson. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I thought it was awful. So, hopefully whoever they put on the Superman titles, I've heard whoever's the Superman writer is going to be the action writer as well. Hopefully they recognize the way that James Tynion did when he came on to Batman. We need to fix these things and get the house back in order. And I hope that happens. Now, the last thing we do have to talk about, I made a video about this not too long ago, maybe a couple videos. Are DC Comics going woke? Obviously, this last week we had the other history of the DC Universe. I think there's going to be 7 issues of that from John Ridley. Batgirl 50, the DC Digital, the new origin for Static for Milestone. We had the was it DC? Was it Voices? I can't remember the name of it. The one that Christian Cooper, where it basically retold the story of when he was harassed in that New York park, and the lady called the police on him because he was black. So we're seeing a lot more of today's social commentary being put in it, with certainly a left spin as far as I'm concerned. That's what it looks like to me. We don't know yet, but it is starting to get into Batman. We're seeing a lot of protests and things like that happening within the pages of Batman. Do you think, in your heart of hearts, when DC Comics picks back up in March and start moving forward, that we're going to be getting DC woke?
I don't think we're going to see it prevalent in the bad titles any more so than we already have. What I think is going to happen is you're to see more projects like the other history of the DC universe, like I Am Not Starfire, whether it's in the YA division or Black Label or whatever banner they publish certain things under. It's a way to allow creators with a social justice bent to get their stories out there.
Is it really about stories, or do you think it's about message? That's my problem. If it was about stories first, then I would be probably fine with it. It always feels like it's message first.
Okay, no, that's my words were poorly chosen. It absolutely is about message. What I don't like about what I see with the other history of the DC universe is, and it's something I hate about SJW Comics. We don't have a problem with building up a character. Where we have the problem is when they tear down the other characters to build one up.
Yeah.
In order to make Black Lightning, in my opinion, completely unlikable, but in order to make him the character John Ridley wanted him to be, he had to make every character in the Justice League either a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, whatever you want to say. And hell, he even showed contempt for Jon Stewart. That's not a fair trade. Nobody comes out of this liking Black Lightning, and you do damage to characters that have been around for decades. I don't understand why that was allowed to be done without any pushback from editorial. And then I realized, okay, maybe that's what editorial wants. And if that's the case, then readers like us, we're going to find the pickings few and far between going forward. Hopefully it's more of a, here it is, take this for what it is. But when we portray these characters in the other books, they're not going to be how they were portrayed in Ridley's book.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the problems with DC's having with not communicating. What is the purpose of Future State? Where are they going with their comic books? Hopefully we do get that message out there. But, with the information that we have, there's some exciting stuff in there. A smaller lineup of comic books, I think, is better. They can focus more on those stories and tell better stories. Some of the top tier writers kind of stepping aside and letting some new writers kind of ascend to those A kind of level characters, I think is good opportunities. I want to see what Williamson can do on a Superman. I want to see what Robert Venditti can do with some of these premier characters. Obviously, he did Green Lantern and stuff, but I want to see what Phil Kennedy Johnson, what Ram V, some of these up and coming writers can do once they fill into those spots. And I think those are good opportunities. The continuity thing, I think it's 50-50. It could be great or it could be terrible. Do I think we're going to get too many Batman books and not enough cool side characters? Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it kind of does look like DC Comics is going kind of that woke route.
Okay,
but we don't know.
Back to a previous point, that how they're streamlining their line at the same time they're introducing dozens and dozens of new characters in a 2-month event. So that goes back to the kind of the mixed messages DC is sending. Where are all these characters going to go after Future State if they're streamlining their monthly out?
Yara Flora will be Wonder Girl. And I imagine we're going to get a Batman series about whoever John Ridley's Batman is.
But that, and I think they'll do something with the non-binary Flash. But that's going to leave a whole lot of characters being created that are just kind of going to be left in limbo. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this because, and again, I'm not sure they know. They could be publishing 45 titles again by the summer. I really don't think they know.
I think they will be publishing like 45 titles or new comics per month, but I don't think it'll be like 85 like they were before. I think it's going to be scaled down quite a lot.
It's going to be interesting to see.
Yep. Well, I can't wait. We should have news in the next few days with over the next week about what the new creative teams in the new direction is. But I can say this: DC Comics has a terrible communication problem, and somebody like you that keeps on top of these things, that reads DC Comics religiously, has no idea what the hell they're doing, and that's on them. That isn't on us.